Hey everyone, welcome to the Darshan Talks podcast. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the people, trust the products you depend on. I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, or obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. I do have to emphasize, I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I'm a pharmacist, but I'm not your pharmacist. My guest is, I believe you're a PhD, aren't you?
Pharma D.
Pharma D. So she's also a Pharma D, but she's not your Pharma D, so she's not your pharmacist. So this is neither legal advice nor clinical advice. These are considerations. These do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host, the guest, their employers, or their clients. If you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe, please share. You can always ask our guests questions, so please feel free to do that. You can always reach out to me on Twitter at DarshanTalks, or just go to our website at DarshanTalks.com. Today's interview is super fun. I have known my guest for several years. I've actually had her husband on twice, but we finally convinced her to join us. She is part of what my girlfriend called a power couple. So if you are interested in medical affairs, if you are trying to understand how companies do product launches, how does a company that came out of nowhere create a major splash? She is in the middle of all of that right now. She's the VP of Medical Affairs for a company called ChemoCentryx, a little company you guys may have heard about, but right now it's been in the news a lot because they've got a really interesting product coming out. Our guest is a pharmacist, as I mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today, Irene von Hennigs. How are you, Irene?
I am fine. So good to see you, Darshan.
It's so good to have you. It's been a while, and in the time that I've known you, you've moved, you've sort of changed, and you've kept going up the food chain. So let's talk a little bit about your career a little bit. Where we don't need to get into specifics, but talk to me a little bit about how you landed up where you are today.
My career, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry and medical affairs for about 26 years. And where I landed today was actually, I started consulting for ChemoCentryx, and I basically fell in love with the science and the of course, leading medical affairs and helping out build, things from scratch. It's really what I'm passionate about. And I ended up joining the company, and and it took off from there, of course.
So you came in as a consultant. Now, one of the things that I've always been afraid of personally is when someone says, we want to bring you in as a consultant, as a 3-month project, and then we'll figure it out from there. In your experience, it worked out for you obviously here, but is that something that you think that is a good idea because you find that there's steady work, you're getting paid a higher rate? Or do you think that is a career non-starter for you? If you are a starting out person in medical affairs, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it wasn't exactly like that. I had started my own consulting company, and I started partnering with different pharmaceutical companies, and ChemoCentryx was one of them. However, because of the stage where ChemoCentryx was, the work was so fascinating. It's exactly what I wanted to do. I would say that the consulting world is amazing, provided a lot of opportunities. You're really accountable for the work. You own it. Not that you don't own it when you're employed within a company, but really the responsibility is on your back. But the beauty of it is you start a project from beginning to end, and the reward is in the product that you deliver to that company. So it was a little bit different here, but there are pros and cons to consulting versus being on board. My consulting business was a first for me. I held it for about 6 months, very successful, but my heart was really in building medical affairs, and especially when science is so fascinating. And I just wanted to see the birth of the product we were working on.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about building a medical affairs team. You came in as a consultant. How do you even go about finding? Are you finding your replacement? Are you finding people who report to you? How do you build a team? And you're doing it from the outside, not from the inside, before you went inside.
Oh, before I went, so it was basically the structures, procedures, priorities, and recruitment, building, also bringing the right individuals. I think there is definitely an art to interviewing and recruiting the right talent. And I'm very fortunate today. I have an amazing team of brilliant minds, and the leadership is amazing on this team, and that's something I enjoy. It's really, you see the product of your efforts into it. As far as building medical affairs is really, what does medical affairs do? We educate the medical community. We partner with them. We increase the awareness. And in my situation here, it's a therapy that's new to the world. It's a first in class. And new actually thinking in therapeutics, where it is an addition to the standard of care.
So it's a new therapy, new standard of care. You've got to do a bunch of education. You're not only educating internally, but you're educating externally. So how do you begin to address the problem of this is a whole new way of thinking? Do you start from the clinical research and going, let's build this out? Like, what is your process to build, as you said, the structure?
It's data. So we go back to our clinical trials and we extract the data. But you cannot present the data if you don't have great presenters, right? And the great minds behind it. So the most important thing starts when you train your team. And training the team is not really a cookie cutter in medical affairs. And that's something that's sometimes it is misunderstood. Training is really an art. It's an art of scientific exchange, where you really would have to sit down and everybody brainstorm on that topic and what might come up and what are we missing and what additional data do we need, and then figure out how to nail it down to educate somebody who might not have seen the data or who might not be aware of I'm in the complement science. And complement is not very much understood, or, right now, I think the knowledge is much higher, but it's not, it's not diabetes, it's not hypertension, it's not the hottest thing. So we really have to be precise, specific, and make sure that we really master the art of scientific exchange.
So that's really interesting. So you mentioned complement science. I'm a pharmacist, worked as a pharmacist for 20 years. I have no idea what that means. What is complement science?
Complement is part of the immune system, and it complements, it's recruited to come help the immune system when there is an offense, like an infection or, chemical or any other offense. So it complements. It's exactly what the name says.
Okay, so is that the same thing as adjunct or adjunctive to another treatment or to the actual natural immune system of the body, or how is that playing itself out?
It's an additional immune system that comes into action, and it gets hyperactivated, or it comes into action when it's not supposed to. So it's either hyperactive, or it's not working when it's supposed to be working, or it's not stopping when it's supposed to stop. So you end up with an autoimmune reaction, basically, that ends up being damaging organs and creating more damage than it should, because it's the complement is really important for defense against, for example, encapsulated bacteria, Neisseria meningitis, for example. However, when the complement doesn't work the way it should work, that's when it starts working against us, and most commonly it affects the kidneys, for example.
So as you said, you're finding yourself educating not just physicians and pharmacists and healthcare providers, but your internal team. You came in as a consultant. When did they bring you in? Was it phase 3? Was it pre-phase 3? When do you come in and start saying, we're ready to start planning a launch of the product?
And I came towards the tail end of it. So phase 3 was done already. Normally medical affairs comes in and it depends on the company. It depends on the the finances of the company and where we are in a product cycle. The norm, or the preferred actually timing, is 2 years before launch. I didn't come 2 years before launch, but I've done it in my past. However, I would say the earlier medical affairs comes in, the better it is, because it takes time to build relationships. It takes time to educate and really go on with clarifying the science and, better understand and dig into the data. So the earlier medical affairs comes into place, the better it is.
So one of the key things you mentioned there is building relationships. In the end, healthcare is a relationship business. Whether it's a physician's relationship with the patient, whether it's the pharma company's relationship with the physician, or any of the other relationships. My question for you is, when you have a novel disease state with a novel treatment, how do you begin to build those relationships? Obviously, you start from the people who are involved in your study, but outside that, how do you start by? You can't buy a database of, say, neurologists or immunologists. What is the pathway you use to go, I need to build a database of people I need to reach out to?
Yeah, so there are relationships, right? So if you are experienced, you come in with relationships already, depending on the specialty that you're going to be calling on and developing those relationships with. However, there are databases and there are companies there that, look into publications, speaking engagement, medical leadership. Then they look at, institutions, academic institutions. They look at centers of excellence for this disease state. And you are able to compile a list. However, the list is as good as the database is, and you always need the human touch and the human knowledge. So what we end up doing is we could start from a certain list that we get from a third party. However, that list ends up being tweaked many times, because what happens is, if I'm talking to Darshan's going to tell me about somebody else who's really an expert in this area, and we're just going to evolve from there. But relationships matter.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that you start from a database and you start tweaking it as you make more and more contacts. One of the big things that we're dealing with now is the idea of GDPR and building these databases in a world where they want to control how you got that data. How has that impacted the type of database you're building and the relationships you can build from there?
So, everything is compliant, and of course we respect all privacy and all, rules and regulations. On the other hand is, if you are an expert in a therapeutic area, it's not a secret, right? You go to one Congress and you know exactly who the experts are, and who. So you read articles. Theoretically, an experienced medical affairs department can really come up with, the experts that we would like to develop relationships and collaborations with, but it takes time. So, the science is out there now, Google and Twitter, and, we have so many tools that we can go by. So it's doable.
So, and we're not talking about your company specifically, but you guys started off as a small company. You're still a growing company. One of the things I've seen done is that a growing company goes, you know what? We don't want to be in the sales or the MSL business. We're just going to partner with a larger company, and they'll do the sales for us, and we'll have some kind of arrangement to split the cost. On the other hand, you guys decide that you want to build it and you want to grow it. How do you make that decision? Were you involved in that thought process?
I was not involved, but what you're referring to, for example, the field medical team is the medical science liaisons, right?
Right.
And there are companies that choose to go the contracting route,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's okay how you do it. I think once you bring the right talent on board, it's okay. What I'm always very passionate about is the training. How much training, whether you do have an in-house team or you have a contracted team, the training is very important. Leadership is definitely important. It's what you do with that team. I think for medical affairs to be successful, they have to be empowered with data and information. And then go further with the training on how to communicate the data, which I call the art of scientific exchange, and everything will work out. And I would just emphasize that leadership in medical affairs is super important. I think the knowledge, education, and background is one thing, but the leadership skills are another thing.
So So the leadership skills are going to be extremely important in deciding how things go. Before we get into leadership, let's talk a little bit about you talked about the use of contract MSLs. Do you in your experience see contract MSLs as a temporary measure, or do you think that companies sort of go, we're going to rely on them for the foreseeable future? And how do those decisions get made?
So I've never had a contract MSL team, but I do have a friend that works in that area and provides those services to companies. I would say that it depends. Again, it depends on where you are. There is a risk of bringing such a talented team and making a big investment when you really don't know. Maybe you're not sure about the phase 3 results, or you're not ready to hire an in-house team. I think those decisions are okay. I think where you really want to do it right is make sure that you're going to the right, third-party vendor to do this. Make sure that you have support, and another important thing is make sure that you welcome that team as if they were, part of the company, because they are your face. They are the face of the company. You can't just rely on, contract MSLs to go and represent the company when they're not aware and they're not included in internal, information, data, and decisions.
So that what I'm hearing you say then is that you treat them as basically part of the team, and that obviously has major ramifications because you are sharing a lot of the treasure trove of data that you have with these with people who are not part of your company. Does that for you in your role as at the VP level cause concern? And is that one of the reasons you've gone, you know what, there are many advantages to that, but for us, we want to grow it internally?
It's not a concern, and I would just clarify, I don't have contract MSLs. I've never had
Right.
them.
Right.
But here's the thing, Darshan, I think trust and empowerment is important. It's the same thing when you bring a consultant on board. You got to trust. If you bring the right people on board, that shouldn't matter. And if I am bringing, for any reason, a contract MSL team, I got to trust them, I got to empower them, and I got to give them enough tools and resources to go out and represent the company. It's no different. Maybe the difference is that you still feel an external as an external person. But again, that vendor that's providing those services, their leadership is very important in making sure that this team is happy, appreciated, and rewarded.
Very, very cool. So what you said is this process is starting, as you said, 2 years before launch. You're now saying we're going to start building a database. We're going to start training our MSLs. We're going to start creating. Are you creating SRDs at this point, standard response documents at this point, or do you wait till further on?
No, everything. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you involved in how the because at the same time, this is not a solo sport. You've got sales and marketing who are simultaneously involved, and you're having these conversations as a team. And obviously, they aren't having an impact on what you do in medical affairs, but they are impacting how the product's going to be positioned. Talk to me a little bit about that early stage of that 2 years, if you will. How are you working together as a team? Is medical affairs going, we can't talk positioning, or are you talking about how does that interaction happen at that point?
So yeah, we do swim in our own lanes, and there are firewalls. But one thing I would say, firewalls doesn't mean that you cannot talk strategy together. Right. One thing to clarify is that medical comes, or actually the field medical team comes with the sales team, right? So by that time, you would hope that we had built enough relationships. Introducing our commercial counterparts or sales counterparts is an introductory visit is okay, and most companies allow that. There's no compliance as long as there is no scientific discussion done jointly. So an introduction and then separation is totally okay. But I would tell you that partnerships between the medical department and the commercial department, even way before launch, is very important. Strategy is strategy, and we all know what our strengths are and what our contribution is. Where medical comes in place is really analyzing the data and looking into data gaps, and where do we want to focus our education on? What are the topics? And you mentioned SRLs, for example, standard response letters. One common mistake that might happen is that you come up with a list, which is a standard list, and you develop the letters. The letters should really be, provide information on questions that might come up. They should fill in data gaps, and they should be very clear, precise, and to the point for them to be valuable. So those are the things where medical should know what the role is. Our role also is publication, scientific communication, talking, reporting insights is another important thing, right? We are the face of the company in the field, and reporting those insights and what we're hearing on clinical practice and what we're hearing from our physicians and our KOLs is very important as well.
So you're now late phase 3, close to launch. Your publication planning's been happening the whole way through. But you're coming in, you're formalizing the process in many ways. Is there a medical writing team that's already been in place at this point, or
depends?
Are you augmenting them? Are you a separate department? Or are you coming in the same department?
They're all under, so all this happens under medical affairs. There are different, there's also grants, there's independent, sponsorships, everything falls under medical affairs, and it all depends on the company and where they are, and, and what investment they want to do. And I would tell there is consulting companies that provide the writing. But again, you got to own it. It's the company is as good as the leadership within medical affairs, having somebody internal who understands the process and understands the data. So the final responsibility and accountability is on the internal team. But again, it depends. There is no rule. Your scientific communication can be externally, or it could be a team that you form internally and bring talent into the company.
So you've now reached a point where you've got these documents together. Are you now involved in the regulatory process in terms of advising on the types of labeling? Because at this point you're going to start having labeling discussions. And are you involved in that process, or is that more regulatory and less medical affairs?
It is more regulatory and it is medical, and again, it depends on the company. Where medical might come in is, to review it with a medical eye, the statements, based on what we're hearing from physicians. Sometimes we are also the link to KOLs, external KOLs. And again, it depends on the company.
So you and I recognize in all cases, let's be clear, it's always dependent on the company. What we're trying to always establish is, what have you seen? What are your experiences, and how do you sort of review these things? So we've now got a situation where you are building these relationships. They're playing a role, and now you're getting ready to launch. What do you find are the key 2, 3, 4 things that you want to make sure are at least in place? Because let's be honest, not everything's always going to make it in time, but you need everything to be at least, you want that structure, as you put it, in place. So what are you making sure at that point that you at least have in place?
Yeah, so it's really the talent, to have the talent, or a contingency plan based, using consultants on the outside. But having the talent, I would tell you that there are certain talents that you have to have internally, like medical information, scientific communication. Sometimes HEOR is part of medical, but the field medical team, again, this is the face of the company. You got to have the right team. You're going to have the right talent, and they have to have the right training and the resources to go represent the company. So once we get to that part when we're ready to launch, you want this team to have developed those, collaborations, those relationships, and the advocates are right there to support us. It's again, awareness, evidence generation, data gaps, relationships matter, and the insights reporting, what they bring back from the field to us. It's very important that we take it seriously and we act on it, because we're listening now. This is what our KOLs are telling us, and we got to listen.
It's amazing. We can keep going, as you know, but as you know, we do have to aim for 15, 20 minutes. We're already at 25. And like I told you, we're going to try to wrap things up. I do have 5 questions if you're open to answering them.
Yes.
The first question, and we've been showing that the whole time, but what's the best way for people to reach you?
LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is open. Please reach out anytime.
Excellent. Second question, what would you like to ask the audience?
I would like to ask the audience, what challenges have we faced, and those of you that are in medical affairs during a pandemic, and how did that benefit or change or made your circumstances worse?
Fair enough. What's something you learned in the last month?
What I learned from last month is what we took for granted pre-pandemic is the live personal relationships, being in front of people one-on-one. Zoom is great, and we've done it, but it doesn't replace having a conversation or coffee, in a personal way. There are things that come up when you're live with somebody that will never come up on Zoom. So
I agree. What's something that made you happy in the last week?
I was at a meeting with my team live, and we got to know each other more and connect.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. And last question, what's something most people don't know about you?
What most people don't know about me, not most, maybe, yeah, is my passion for helping children out there. And if I were to win a lottery tomorrow, I will spend it all on orphanages to make their life better and get them out of the hardship that they have.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That's incredible. Again, this was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Irene. I appreciate it. I do hope you'll consider coming back again.
Absolutely. Anything for Darshan.
You're very kind. Thank you.